We resolve it. We don't change what happened, but we absolutely change how the nervous system is remembering it. And we do that with creative imagination. All of us do. We all dream. So it's once you clock the science of it, funnily enough, the science, the left brain understanding of the science, enables people to access the right brain, you know, evolutionary wisdom.
Mark Brayne, welcome back to the Art and Science of EMDR, and thank you for joining us. This is late night for you, isn't it?
It is. It's 10 o'clock at night.
That's
Yep.
very, very nice of you to join us
Well, it's
that
lovely
late.
to be back with you.
Yeah. So, Mark, I wanted to start before we get to attachment-informed EMDR, which is the approach you're teaching EMDR therapists. I want to ask you about something you wrote in your book, and you compare EMDR to a dance. Can you explain this analogy?
With pleasure. I don't know if you have in the States a show called Strictly Come Dancing. It's probably called something different, but in the UK it's called Strictly Come Dancing, where celebrities are paired up with professional dancers and they go through a series of weekly competitions, and then as a pair win at the end. You see the celebrities learning how to dance in the process. It's very funny, very rewarding, and very human and live. Do you have that in the States?
I think there's Dancing with the Stars or
That's it.
something like
Dancing
that.
with
Yeah.
it. Yes, dancing with this, or dancing. I think we call it dancing over here. Um, the thing about a dance, and I don't know how many of you are old enough. You're all looking very young. Those of you who got your cameras on. Those of you who haven't got your cameras on, it would be lovely to see. If you felt like putting your cameras on, it's much nicer to see real people over there on Zoom. Hi, thank you, Carrie, for doing that, and Mandy, it's lovely. Um, I don't know how many of you are old enough to have learnt classical dancing, ballroom dancing at school. Well, I was at a boarding school in England in the mid 1960s, doing my A levels, my what you guys call high school, and it was a co-ed school, boys and girls, a state-run co-ed school, and every Saturday night we were taught in what we call Nissen huts. There was World War II corrugated iron huts. And we were taught, we had the opportunity to learn the waltz and the quick step, age sort of 14, 15, 16. And every Saturday night we would have what was called a hop. And from 6:30 to 8:30, we would convene in the assembly hall in one of these wartime Nissen huts. And we would practice our fantastic dance skills. And we would go down one side because none of us could turn. So we'd go, quite quick, slow, slow, quick, slow, slow, quick, slow down one side, and then stop, walk across with your partner in the back doors. I had my first kiss in there, I have to say. I remember it well. So we learnt waltz and quick step. And the thing about the basic steps, hearing the analogy with EMDR, you have to learn the basic steps to be able to do kick ass, waltz or a quick step or a foxtrot or a Lindy hop or whatever. You have to have the rhythm. You have to have the step. I'm really good at waltzing and quick step. Unfortunately, I will do the quick step to any rhythm at all, including the samba, because that's the only dance I can do. But the EMDR, the analogy with dancing is that you have to know the basic steps. Otherwise, you'll never win Strictly Come Dancing. But if you stick with the basic steps, you'll never win Strictly Come Dancing or Dance with the Stars. You have to internalize the steps, the rhythm. You have to get into the rhythm so it becomes second nature. And then when you dance, when you dance, it is something so much more than just the basic steps. And for me, that's a perfect analogy for the kind of EMDR we do with a client. And it's a dance with the client. I'm constantly stepping on the client's toes and they're constantly stepping on mine as we learn how to dance elegantly, magnificently together and movingly. So there you go. That's the analogy. Good question.
Okay,
Nobody's ever asked me that one.
All right, Mark, let's start talking about phase one through the lens of attachment-informed EMDR, we're not so in our, with our basic steps, if you will, we're learning to identify bad things that happen, but with attached through the lens of attachment-informed EMDR, we're also looking at these good things that didn't happen, the nurturing, or the lack of nurturing, right? The lack of attunement, the caregivers. Can you talk a little bit about that and how it makes, and why we do that and how it makes a difference?
Yeah, I'm sure that many of our friends here know Laurel Parnell's work, and I trained for many years very closely with Laurel Parnell, and was her books Therapist's Guide to EMDR 2007, I think, and 2013 Attachment Focused EMDR were enormously influential. I was actually working that way before I read her books, and I read her books and thought, oh my goodness me, that's how I work. And it gave me some very useful structure. The reason I call it attachment informed is partly because out of respect for Laurel's term attachment focused, but also because it's more than just focused. The EMDR that I do, that I advocate and train, and Patricia, we're going to bring you in at some point, because Patricia is a relatively recent still attendee on my online dedicated workshops, and is I hope Patricia an enthusiast for this way of working. The reason I've shifted from focused to informed, and Dini Laliotis, interestingly, over your way, teaches attachment focused as well. She has a website called attachmentemdr.com. So it's becoming increasingly mainstream. The reason I call it attachment informed is, if we understand every single client presentation as fundamentally attachment informed, it is a paradigm shift. I've got a proposal in for the EMDR conference, because I'm an EMDR approved consultant and training provider as well. I don't do basic trainings, but I do advanced post-basic trainings. I've got a proposal in for the September online conference, which is very exciting, innovations and adaptations, and would encourage you all to come along to there. I hope it gets accepted. But I'm advocating this way of working as literally a paradigm shift. I mean, it's fairly bold claim. It's up there with Shapiro saying, I've found a way of working with trauma that beats all kinds of psychotherapy. Well, I think I've stumbled into a way of working with EMDR that sort of beats all other forms of EMDR. And it really is anything that comes through the door. Because, and this is a really important point to make to you all, nobody comes to therapy because of the bad things that happen to them. It's a big statement, a really big statement, if you think about it. Nobody comes to therapy because bad things happen to them. They come to therapy because they can't deal with the bad things that happen to them. Their nervous system is not able to metabolize what is happening, what's happened, being triggered in the present, anticipating the future, the stuff that's accumulated over a lifetime, traumatic flashbacks, nightmares. The problem is not in the past, it's in the present. That's where Shapiro was absolutely right, talking about the presenting past. We meet our clients, patients, whatever you call them, in the present. So if we understand whatever it is that they're presenting as actually telling the story of their maladaptive formative past, what we look for, not intellectually asking them in their left brain, because they won't know it, their left brain, but the right brain knows, how did I get to be this way? And what I'll do is, Rotem, if it's okay with you, I might do a joint bridge with everybody just to sort of show you what I mean. In attachment-informed EMDR, rather than taking a list of 10 worst memories or doing an endless list of all the terrible things that happened with your mother, the clustering with your father, all of the abuse and neglect and everything that piled up. Yes, we're interested in that. Of course we are. We're really interested in that. But underneath it, we're looking at the attachment patterns, the way the nervous system got programmed, got formed from the moment of conception, and actually before, in terms of intergenerational stories handed down. How did this client's nervous system get to be the way that it is, that it can't deal with, or that it's maladaptively responding to stuff and it's still getting triggered? So if we take the present as the way in, that takes us back 99 times out of 100 to maternal attachment. And this is not to blame mothers, not to put mothers on trial at all. And I often say, Rotem, you've heard me say, I've never yet met a mother, heard of a mother, or had one who didn't do her best. Every mother, but we're all born of a mother, And that formative start, and then everything that unfolds in the wider context of family and dad and partners and family and grandparents and cousins and siblings and so on. Everything that, and kindergarten and school, everything that unfolds is built on that core experience at the beginning. So if we have what I call radical curiosity to explore these formative experiences, it's under trauma. You can get a lot of noise. How many of you know the difference between noise and signal? Anybody know the difference between noise and signal? In research, you can have data points. David, you know the difference a bit between noise and signal. You put your hand up. I'll assume you do. If you're doing research, you can have data points all over a graph. Or if you're listening to a shortwave broadcast from a distant radio station, you hear a lot of hiss and crackle. That's all noise. The data points all over the place is noise. But what's the message in there? What's the signal in the noise? And our clients present with a lot of noise often. Right underneath it, what's the signal? And that's where EMDR absolutely takes off. It's a radical shift of focus. It's as big as that. So, Rotem, does that sort of set things up?
Yes, absolutely. So we're learning, right? You're saying that we're learning to listen even before the intake appointment, right? When client calls us for the first time and we start developing this different lens through which we look and conceptualize our clients' issues. And then there's phase two. And phase two, there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of similarities with Laurel Purnell with the nurturing figure, right? And the wise figure and spiritual figures and protected figures. You have some really, I really like the images in your book about, the whole team in the DeLorean. Can you talk a little bit about your approach to phase two? This is very different than, your traditional container and calm place, safe place, peaceful place, comfortable place, whatever it's called in 2024. It's a lot more than that. Can you talk about what you do in phase two differently and why you do that?
I build very much on Laurel Parnell's transformative insights, where those of you who know her work will know how she prioritizes the tapping in. We tend not to talk about installation because that's an old Shapiro term. It's more like installing software into a computer. We tap it in. Tapping is this very useful term. Just whenever we do bilateral stimulation, it's tapping. It's even if you're doing headphones, I talk about tapping. It's really, really, really good. I don't use an awful lot of eye movement, and I certainly don't use eye movement for phase two. I do use eye movement in phase four when there's heightened affect and you want to keep the client in the present. But in phase two, Laurel, and I've watched Laurel work a lot live. I used to organize her trainings over here in the UK. She taps in a number of nurturing figures, protective figures, and a number of wise figures. And I've sort of distilled it down. I'm just to flag up, I was relatively recently, in the greater scheme of things, finally diagnosed with autism, which makes a lot of sense in my life. So I got my autism diagnosis, what used to be called Asperger's, just 4 years ago, now nearly 74. So I was 70 when I got it. And oh my goodness me, the lights went on. And one of the things about being autistic is that I see things in structures. And those of you who know Temple Grandin talks about thinking in pictures. I do too. I think in structures, and I see structures, and I need to create structures. So what I've done is I've taken Shapiro's basic structure, which is brilliant. The 8 phases, the fundamental architecture of EMDR as defined by Shapiro is fantastic. It's a wonderful sort of frame in which to work. Harry Potter and Dumbledore in big cheesy relationship. I'm sure you all know that. It's history taking, preparation, assessment, desensitization, installation, body scan, closure, and reevaluation. So Harry Potter and Dumbledore in big cheesy relationship. In phase two, what I do is I have formalized 3 nurturing figures. I tap in a special, safe, calm place, but I don't prioritize it, and I don't use the container exercise. I hardly use it at all. The reason being that I focus enormously on session structure, so that identify and tap in resource figures as a precondition work with any client. And I ask them to do 3 nurturing figures with the qualities of kindness, tenderness, warmth, affection. And they can be real or imaginary, human or animal, historical or contemporary, from movies, from religion, from mythology, from fairy tales, whatever. And I help them along. I've got a list I prepared earlier in my book. This is my book. There we are. That's my book. A list that if people get stuck, I sort of help them along. So we have protective, nurturing figures, protective figures. I usually find one wise figure is enough. You don't want competing sources of wisdom. When you say, what would your wise figure? You say, what various options would your various wise figures give you? Because they might disagree. But what you do, Rotem, in phase 2, it's an incredibly important part. By spending a bit of time, I mean, it only takes 15 minutes to do this. Perhaps I could ask Patricia how it was for you, learning the speed with which you can do this. It just takes 15 minutes, and usually in session 2, to tap these guys in, this team. They can be, anything from an oak tree to a samurai warrior to my best friend's mum. We tap them, and that introduces bilateral stimulation. It gets the nervous system used to what this thing is, and it's very benign. You're not firing any sort of nasty stuff up. And it also activates the creative imagination, what Carl Jung would call active imagination. It fires up the nervous system ready to imagine. And of course, what we're doing in phase 4 is accessing the imagined and remembered past, which is still looping in pictorial, in emotional, in imaginal form. It's not literally happening, it's happening in the imagination. We're firing up the balancing capacity, the adaptive response in phase 2, very explicitly in a safe place. And Jamie Marich is very hot on this. I work very closely with Jamie over the years. Jamie points out that a special place or a safe place in phase 2 is a dissociative experience. So if you take people to a safe place in phase 4, you're actually taking them out of the experience that you want to metabolize. Actually, I use resource figures, not too early, because you want to hear the story, much more proactively than I use a safe place, because you want to actually change the past, proactively reimagine the past. And I could tell you lots and lots of stories about how clients and I have reimagined the past in a way that now feels real. I promise you, my great uncle is not standing on the playground of my primary school. And I go past that primary school, and I promise you that nobody else sees him, but I do. And he stopped these little boys bullying me 60 years ago. He didn't, but he does now. And so that story no longer happens to me in my internal memory. And the shame is gone of being bullied age 7. So there you go.
How do you
phase 2.
explain that, Mark? How do you explain that to people who are very left brain rational, like as using active imagination, using these imaginal resources? I know I get that sometimes. And interestingly, we talked a little earlier today. We had a meeting with Heart Math with John from Heart Math, and now we can show clients very clearly how they're, just what they focus their thoughts on really affects their second to second heart rate variability. But I'm curious about how you explain that to clients.
The way I explain it to clients is there's no such thing as external reality. Well, there is external reality, but internally what we experience is reconstructed. Every single piece of information that comes into the brain comes in electronic form. You're watching me in light and sound, and your ears and retinas are turning that into electrical impulses in your brain, which is being reconstructed in the visual and auditory cortex into a picture of me and a sound of me with my English accent. I've got an English accent because your brain is cross-referencing what you're hearing against the database of previous experience.
Yeah.
If you think the amygdala is processing, and I say to clients, the amygdala is processing 2 million bits of information per second, and it's filtering everything safe, not safe, and it's referencing everything that's coming in against the database of personal, collective, and ancestral and species past experience. It's incredibly, and it's amazing what's happening. And it is rebuilding an internal reality. Well, we use imagination with qualities and resource figures, and we go into the past. We find that terrible moment when you're being abused by your father, or you're being bullied on the playground at school, and we resolve it, or you're having a car crash or surviving a tsunami. We resolve it. We don't change what happened. but we absolutely change how the nervous system is remembering it. And we do that with creative imagination. All of us do. We all dream. So it's once you clock the science of it, funnily enough, the science, the left brain understanding of the science, enables people to access the right brain, evolutionary wisdom and intuition. It usually works.
Yeah. I love that you talk about that. I posted in our community a few months ago a video that I found on YouTube is called "Is Reality Real?" And it really talks about they're neuroscientists and physicists, and they all talk about that same concept that our reality, even though we perceive it as external, a lot of it is already kind of preconditioned, and then whatever is happening outside is already interpreted through these programs.
That's right. And what we do with EMDR, and EMDR is a power tool, is the closest thing to magic that I've ever come across. I mean, it is what used to be understood as magic, through the millennia, spells and witch doctors and shamans. That's faith healers, exorcisms, and so on. This is the stuff of human experience and has been, since the dawn of time. We've just now got a scientific understanding of what we're doing to neural circuits. And EMDR is when you get in there and understand what it is that you need to rewire. I talk about reveal, rewire, repair. I have some jargon. Any new approach worth its salt has to have jargon. So I have the 3 W's, the 3 R's. So in phase 4, we have reveal, rewire, and repair. And then not too soon, but before the end of each session, because I never have an incomplete session. I never have an incomplete session. Did you hear that, guys? I never have to close an incomplete session. I come back over the bridge and check it against the present. I have the 3 W's. What does the child need, or what needs to happen? Who can do that? Who can make that happen? Would you like to imagine it? WWW. So lots of structural jargon, which seems to work. Can I, Rotem, ask Patricia if she'd like to just briefly comment
Absolutely.
on your... I can ask you. The question is, will she answer? Having done both my Unleash Your EMDR workshops.
So what is the question?
Does it work? Does this way of re-understanding EMDR work?
It's extremely effective, and I think that one of the things that most important, probably it changed the way I think of EMDR and I practice, was something that you taught me. I reached out to you kind of freaking out after a client was very upset after the reprocessing, although I did all the traditional thing that they teach us in basic training of, like after that containing and say the account space and some grounding, but still there was activation. And you told me never leave the child of the client in the scene. You have to retrieve them and bring them back to safety.
To the present.
To the present. You have to bring them over the bridge. And that was probably the best golden nugget that I could have received.
Brilliant.
It made it so much more effective.
Thank you, Patricia. That's one of the key things I teach. The 2 key things I teach and that have transformed my EMDR are this radical curiosity around what it's really about, getting underneath through the noise down into the signal. And you use bridging, proactive bridging up front to do that. And I'd love to do a sort of joint bridge with you, perhaps after the half hour. But we go over the bridge into the client's past, and we sort it out to the best of our ability in that session. We don't necessarily complete the targets. There may be months, years sometimes of work still to be done. But at the end of every session, we come back over the bridge and check in against the present and make sure that any ego states that have been activated are not locked away in some vault in the past or in a book that you've closed down. And we explicitly bring the client and check in against the present. That's the value of starting from the present, proactively bridging from the here and now and using the present as the, if you like, the Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole that we take the client down to get into their Wonderland through the little door at the bottom. I tell you what, actually, just before you wrap up, Rita, I was going to say one thing. Harry Potter and Dumbledore in Big Cheesy Relationship is the 8-phase basic standard EMDR protocol that you've all been trained in. And that is the basis. Everything that I advocate builds on that. So my mnemonic is Charlie Chaplin recognizes that attachments are seriously salient, which stands for case conceptualization, resourcing, target identification, activation, appropriate activation in phase 3, rewiring, and session structure. Seriously salient is session structure. So Charlie Chaplin, come on on our 5-part series of webinars that we're about to do, that we've recorded, that Rotem and are launching very shortly, and you'll hear more about Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah, I want to, Mark, just say a few words about this training. We're starting February 8th, right? And it will be throughout February and March. So again, there's going to be a gap between, I think we were doing 3 weeks, then taking a break, and then doing another week, taking another, I think it's March 14th, and then the 28th. So we're really letting people try to practice it with clients and come back to you with some questions and doing some practice. I think I'm not crazy about the model of weekends. Sometimes, you have to do what you have to do, but I love that you're teaching it over a period of time. It's interactive. People also don't need to take some time off of work. So it's not like a full day. There's videos that people are going to watch while they take the training. And then there's going to be 5 2-hour meetings with you. That's happening again starting February 8th in a couple of weeks. I also, while we have you all here, I want to announce that Mark is coming to Denver, which I'm really excited about. And we're doing a training here that will be Friday and Saturday, October 4th and 5th. And Patricia, if you can post that link in the chat, it's going to be limited to 35 people. So I'm sure that's going to be full. So I'm excited to have you here in October, Mark. And one more thing, Mark is also going to be on our book club. So starting September, so September, October, November, December, he's going to go over that book that he just showed you to teach Attachment-Informed EMDR. And the reason why, I think you have to put it under your chin to be a lot, not, yeah.
That's
yeah. And the reason why there's so many offerings from Mark is I think that the way he teaches EMDR can really be transformative with these clients that we all got stuck with, and that, sometimes challenging to work with. And I think that this approach can be really transformative. So we are going to switch over to the Q&A section. So Mark Brayne, I want to thank you one more time for joining us on a very late night for you in Europe.
As the Germans say, ich habe zu danken. It's I who should be grateful. It's a delight to be with you. It always is. And it's a busy year. Train now while stocks last. I'm not as young as I was.
Thank you, Mark.